Hey everyone, and welcome back to Off the Mats at Walters Jiu-Jitsu. And today we are joined with Corey Smith. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So we asked you here because you are in law enforcement.
Yes, ma'am.
And I feel like there's some conversation about law enforcement and a grappling martial art. So if you would just start by telling us what came first, law enforcement or grappling?
Grappling, but not in the way like in this function here at this facility, but grappling, high school wrestling for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and then law enforcement came. I had an uncle that was in law enforcement back home where I'm from, and I hate to sound cliche and sound a little immature, but like I kind of was drawn to like all the movies and stuff like that, and I was like, I think I would like to be a police officer. Had no idea what being a police officer really meant, and then that's kind of just what I stuck to. When you start to get towards your senior year and everybody's, counselors asking you, hey, what do you want to do? You need to get serious about, you want to go to college, and then, okay, you go to college, what are you going to do for a profession? So I think I want to be a police officer. And I kind of kept towards that for the most part. I kind of had times where I was like, I might want to do something else, but that's what won out. And then I started getting into policing, and I had the wrestling background, and kind of, delved into it a little bit because at ECU they had a club wrestling team, which I participated in a little bit, but never was a part of the team. I would go to practices a little bit, and then I got out of college, went to BLET, and started law enforcement, and I really was very drawn to use of force and stuff like that. I was like, okay, I'd like to be a SCAT instructor. That's what they called it back then. And Heath Chapman, my professor, he was around for sure, hot and heavy, and I knew of him. I actually joined his gym at one point, and then I stopped going because I just wasn't focused. And then I pretty much said, dude, you're an idiot. Like, you need to get back into that stuff. And I was so glad I did.
You kind of had a break, I guess, while you were in college mostly. So how long were you in law enforcement before you really started to train?
That's a good question. I would say consistently, like if people ask me right now today how long I've been doing jiu-jitsu consistently, and I would say give or take, it's been about 6 years consistently. Okay. So I kind of account for, like I got my blue belt in 2020, and it's almost 2026, so that's about right. When I finally got in that, when I finally joined again, I didn't leave anymore, and I stayed fairly consistently and got to it, and really made it a part of my life. So it's been about 6 years. And I've been in law enforcement 11 years. Okay. So it probably took me 4 to 5 years to finally realize, like, you know how that goes. You always hindsight. It's like, man, I wish I would have just stayed in it. I lost all that time. But now I can tell the younger generation, like, hey, trust this stuff. This stuff is good. It works. You'll be happy you stayed with it. You don't get time back, so get in and stay in it. The times that it's hard and you think you don't want to, just look past that, work through it, and then you'll be happy you did.
Yeah.
100%.
Absolutely. So I was actually going to ask, I think we have law enforcement that we know, and Nick, you've helped at BLET programs.
Yep. I've also done the State Trooper Academy. I've helped up there as well in Raleigh. So, and we have plenty of law enforcement guys here. I think we have 12.
Yeah.
From different branches.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's, from kind of what I've talked to law enforcement that I know, it's like there's kind of a misconception, or I don't know quite what to call it, but they think they can rely too much on a weapon, or just that, like, they're big or they're law enforcement, I'm going to be respected, but that's really not the case. And
it's true. You're right. So I'm so glad. So when Nick asked me, I was so happy because this is something that, nowadays it's all about platforms. And when you start to get out there and start to become a trainer, of law enforcement, it's great because you kind of are replicating what's been happening to you in the jiu-jitsu gym. Mm-hmm. What's helped me train law enforcement is like getting trained by guys like Heath and Nick and all these other great practitioners, because they're doing the same thing we're doing. They're looking at technique, the detail, and then they're talking about that. But then what you mentioned is really cool because you talked about like an over dependency on weapons and stuff, and that is a real thing. But I was really happy to come tonight because jiu-jitsu, what really it's done for me for the law enforcement side, even just let's say before I was a trainer, I truly feel like if you really are doing it consistent and really challenging yourself and pushing yourself, not even from a competition standpoint. Let's just say you go in there and you do 45 minutes to an hour of instruction, and then you stay after for open mat, and then you really test yourself. I really feel like it helps my decision making. There's no question, and I think
100%.
and I really think that I have seen other officers that have bought. I'll call it buying in. When they buy in, they make better decisions, and it's not an arrogance thing. It's not they just feel a lot more comfortable being uncomfortable, and I mean that. It that means that they might. So you mentioned like a over dependency on tools. They might get to a point where they don't even think as soon to use a taser or OC spray or whatever, and it's not because they don't feel like they need it. They just are processing things a little deeper, because they have put themselves through like a fire. And think about it, if you're on the mat and you're doing a live round and you're thinking about framing and and pedaling and shrimping and then grabbing the gi a certain way, or framing something away, and then you're trying to get a certain grip so you can start. You're thinking about all that stuff. If you put yourself in a stressful situation out there, it's not all the same, but there's something that is very, very correlating. It's very, very similar. So I just really think it helps them slow things down.
It does, because you're just controlling your breathing.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, 1,000%.
And that's definitely helping you guys in that stressful situation.
Oh yeah.
When you're in those those difficult situations.
Oh yeah.
Out in the streets.
Yeah.
And even using muscle memory from jiu-jitsu, right? Like you're not having to think; you can just kind of
just
do it.
react.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about so it was funny because I think about the last time me and Nick rolled, and you were on bottom, and man, he was killing me. I couldn't pass his guard, but I knew that I had to stay where I was or I was going to get swept. But I had reached a point, and man, I feel it in this gym so much more for some reason. I don't know, but every time I come in here, I get to a point of almost like nausea. And people that are watching, they're going, man, this is crazy. I'm like, no, it's wonderful. I was like, you don't understand, and I have a point with this. But you think about it. If Nick was like, he was like, why are you stalling, bro? I was like, because I'm about to vomit. I was like, and if I vomit, I don't want to, so I'm like, so what am I saying? I'm saying if you start to get an awareness with your body and what you can and can't do. So in that situation, I was just trying to survive. There was two goals: to not vomit and to not get swept. Now I stalled. I did. I said, yeah, bro, I'm sorry. I told it. He said it's okay. I said, yeah, but that's the thing. But there's so many other things that transitions to. Like he said, you're controlling your breathing. You're knowing you've built some kind of inner resilience to where you're like, I can't. It's not like I can beat everybody up, but it's like I've been uncomfortable. I've been stressed out. There's been times where I felt like I couldn't keep going, but I made myself keep going. And because you've exposed yourself to that, you're just a lot more. I think the decisions are a lot more available to you. You're not kind of confined to just one or two things. You might be confined to 3 or 4 or 5.
Yep.
Absolutely. And what would you say, maybe some people are wondering that are in law enforcement, okay, jiu-jitsu, cool, but we're standing up. But don't most fights end up on the ground?
Correct.
Right? A lot of
Yeah.
things.
No,
Even
you're right.
even in UFC, you take a kick, you take a punch, the other person usually falls or
Yes.
ends up in some kind of down spot. But how is it going to apply to me? How can I use that?
Very
I've
good.
seen handcuffing techniques.
Oh yeah.
Control of.
So that's another great question. So when I first started getting hot and heavy into training at the police department, it was definitely jiu-jitsu is definitely one of those things that you got the outer world of law enforcement, you got those skeptics, and then you've got the world of law enforcement that are skeptic. And I'm sure Nick has experienced it where they're like, I just don't know that that's really what we need to be pushing because the ground is dangerous. And I wholeheartedly agree. But I can tell you that from being what used to be called SCAT, now it's called CCT, Compliance and Control Tactics instructor, is teaching defensive tactics and subject control to law enforcement. And I, from personal experience being out there in the field, 9 times out of 10, if you encounter a resistive or assaultive subject, at some point that altercation, that contact, you're going to the ground. You know, so it's like, you know, and why? It's because they're easier to try. You're trying to take somebody's will away from them, and you're trying to put them affect custody when they don't want to be putting out. I mean, just any person. Do you think that would be? I mean, Nick's fought people upright, standing.
Yeah.
And if I wanted to do that and put your hands behind your back against your will, and you don't want to let me, is that going to be easy?
Difficult.
Yeah, is it going to be easier standing, or is it going to be easier on the ground? It's going to be easier on the ground. So if we know that, and we know that our officers are more than likely going to try to take somebody down to the ground, we would want them to know what to do when they're down there.
Yes.
And I like it too, because I think a lot of people, you mentioned a misconception, and I'm really glad, because this is really going to reach people. It's not that we want you to get down there and do funky sweeps, and
Right.
you know, we're not trying to score 2 points for a sweep and 3 for a pass. And I love that, by the way. There's
Sure.
competition, and there's this for that. But we want you, for me, the trainer and me for law enforcement, I want you to be able to make the decision when it's getting bad down there. You can make the decision, the willful decision. You choose, I can get up and get away.
Mm-hmm.
And if you train that down there, then you are more, I think you're more readily available to make that decision. And that's why it's important to me,
Yes.
you know? So that's what I think. There's so much value to it. It's not that we want to teach people. There's some really cool stuff that you can do with law enforcement, defensive tactics, and subject control with jiu-jitsu, 100%. But like Nick teaches in his gym, and he teaches this. It's the fundamentals. Well, you know, if you're extraordinary at the basics, that goes a long way.
100%.
A long way.
The basics are the best.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not like you guys, correct me if I'm wrong, please,
Mhm.
in your law enforcement training and then your defensive tactics training, it's not like you're spending 6 months, a year. Like, you have short periods of time where you're just like, hey, this is like a day seminar
Yeah.
or like a weekend thing. So it's not something they do every day and get repetitive training.
There's a correlation, you know, because, you know, what folks like Heath and Nick and all great practitioners do, they realize over time through trial and error, because I found it out through teaching law enforcement, there's a certain way you got to teach someone.
Yeah.
Because if you try to do it one way, you're going to find that, yeah, they're not getting it. You know, they're not getting it that good. And then if you do it this way, you're like, wow, why are they doing so much better, and they're actually looking better. Law enforcement, it's a big bear to wrestle with, training law enforcement, because if you try to cram so much into one, like, you know, one day,
Session or whatever.
yeah, it ain't gonna work.
It's like trying to teach our little preschool class to baramola.
Yeah, no doubt. No, seriously, you're right. So I have found, just from a little bit of time that I've started to do it, we have found things that are very simple to understand, and we get some buy-in with them from that. And one of the biggest techniques right now that I can think of that's done that for cops is the gift wrap.
Yeah.
It's like
Beautiful.
that's not a hard concept for them to figure out, but it's so successful statistically. If they can get that onto that position and they can grip it and get it that way, they find, like, wow, this is like magic, and I didn't have to work so hard to get it.
Correct.
And the suspects don't realize how controlling this is. And so we spend a lot of time on that, and then we break away from it. And then maybe, like, you know, the next time I see them in a couple weeks or a couple months, all right, gift wrap. And then it's like they didn't do it. They haven't done it probably, unless they had a use of force between the time period of that training. They haven't done it any. And then it's like, oh, I remember this now. And then you give them a lot. And then you do something else. Maybe you start to push something, another similar, maybe a little bit more complicated, like physically, but like knee on belly.
Yeah.
Like knee on belly is another thing that is so it could be very dominating and very beneficial, but if we can just teach them, you know, how to get a feel for it, how to flow, where to place the knee, how to move their body, and you know the dynamics of it and all that, then you start to hone in on that. And then, like I said, a lot is
Yeah.
really what wins the day with training.
Absolutely. And I know you train both gi and no gi.
Yes.
And I know in no gi for tournaments or even training in the gym, we don't grab the clothes, right?
Correct. You're not
But
supposed to.
well, you're not, whatever. But in the streets, like, that's why I think the big argument is, well, gi doesn't work in the streets. Like, you don't have a gi top on.
I
Yeah,
tell
but you have a
people that all the time.
you have a sweater.
If,
Like,
if you're at the beach, no gi is perfect.
Yes,
if
yes,
you're
yes.
in real life situations,
Yeah.
the gi is optimal.
Yes, I love what we're talking about, because when I joined Heath's gym, you know, I did. Even the second time, I was in my mind, I was like, I don't know about this gi, man. I get it, and I'm saying I'm not going to do it, but I just don't think it's that realistic. And then, like, the more I trained it, and I'm not even joking, I like the gi more now than I do no gi. Now, it's about 60-40, but I truly love the gi because I love everything about it. I love, you know, the more availability of threats that you have to defend and the more threats that you can impose. I love the sweat that you get from being in that hot robe. Like, you know, I feel like you sweat a little faster. Your forearms are going because you're gripping all the time, and you know, I love the feeling of it. There is just some magic to it. There really is, and I tell you, we are primarily a gi school back home at Heath's Gym. We are. I think we only right now do like 2 no gi classes a week, and then of course if anybody wants to go in there and get extra, they can. But it has not slowed me down at all with my no gi. I mean, I would still I still want to put in the time to be more effective at no gi if I'm going to do a tournament or something. But I don't feel like I really skip much of a beat just from training. I love training the gi, so it's flipped for me. 1,000. Oh, and with law enforcement, yeah, real life, it translates. I mean, it's a big translation. Like it is very realistic, and I can tell you, I've seen it. You can grab some clothes and do some cool stuff with them.
Especially in the wintertime. Like
better
now,
believe it.
People wearing hoodies, Cohort jackets, right?
Yeah, it is.
Like
yeah.
that's a gi.
You better believe it. Like there's tons that you can do, and it's funny because like when I go to teach class or whatever, I'll show the concept that I got from either somewhere like him or Heath, and I'm like, look guys, when you go to pull this guy's leg out of the car, you know, I know it's hard to grab, but take those fingers and put them up in those jeans and pull them out. You know, and then they're like, oh, I'm like, yeah, you can do that. There's nothing wrong. That is good stuff. And then I got it from training jiu-jitsu. It's just the way it is, you know. So there's tons of translation. It is very realistic. Very realistic.
Yeah, I just think people, maybe if they're looking into training, it could be beneficial because I feel like a lot of trainers I know that train law enforcement, like you mentioned, they're always telling the cadets or telling the people, like, it's so beneficial. It could save your life.
It can.
You know, like,
it can.
Most of the time, some of those guys are out there by themselves.
Yep.
You know, like, you have to have the skills to defend yourself.
Yep.
Without using a weapon. Like, you can't just go around like
no,
your weapon off at
it's
everyone.
very true. Like now we're talking about the gi, and now you're talking about that again, and I think it's great. You could spend days talking about this. I just started another class that's fairly new. It's called Armed Assailant Response, and in there we actually look at, and I got Heath to help me out with the curriculum because I was like, I think I can do these things. Can you just make sure I'm not stupid about it? He's like, yeah, I got you. And we were looking at like, what do you do like in a deadly force situation if your gun is not available? Like maybe there's too many people around or stuff like that, or you know,
the other person knocked their gun out of your hand.
Yeah, no doubt. And we started looking at chokes with clothing, you know, and like you know hoodies. Taking a T-shirt and binding it up and making them, because you know a T-shirt's very thin material.
Yeah.
But if you roll that joker up, you know it becomes thicker, and then how are you going to apply a choke with that? You know, and it's like you can do it. This can happen. Like you just got to get people to buy in.
Right.
Like they're like, I just don't know, and it's like you can do these things. You really can. You just got to believe it, and then you train it and you do it. But I mean, the decision making I talked about, but I just think jiu-jitsu just makes you so tough, man. I just do. If people would just get in it and stay in it, it just really sharpens your resilience. It just when you get out there and you roll, and you start sweating and breathing heavy, and somebody's trying to take you down, or then they get you to the ground and you're trying to get up and they won't let you, and they're grabbing your clothes to keep you down, and you're like, I didn't think. When I first went in that gym and I finally signed on the dotted line and got committed, he took me in the gym and he said, all right, let's start. And he starts with one round, and he was grabbing my clothes. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna get up. And I'm just like, hey, like I can't stop it, you know.
Right.
So how do I? Then you got to think. You got to think like, how do I do this? And the journey begins. You start to actually pay attention to technique and how to defeat these things, and it truly helps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think for law enforcement specifically, like I know what jiu-jitsu has done for me,
Mm-hmm.
but when you're looking at law enforcement and it being good for law enforcement, do you think jiu-jitsu would be better for physical, or it's more helpful mentally for them during their job, right?
That's a very good question, because I've thought about these things that we were going to talk about. I think it's both, 1,000%.
I think so.
I think it's
Wow.
both. So like the physical, let's say, okay, what's your goal? To lose weight.
Mhm.
You will lose weight. There's that. Now, of course, you have to pay attention. I'm not at all a nutrition, a dietitian, nothing like that. But we all, you understand some dynamics of it, because if you're trying to lose weight for a tournament or something, you're like, I can't eat junk right now. I got to watch what I eat, watch what I drink. But if you I got a good friend, Justin White, who Nick knows well. That kid at one point, I hope he doesn't get mad at me about this, but I'm proud of him. This is a good thing. He weighed like 40 pounds more than he did before he started jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And he got into it and fell in love with it. And he's like the healthiest he's ever been. And definitely, I'm sure he'll tell you, he's like the most mentally focused he's ever been. So you 1,000% physically, you can lose weight, live a healthier lifestyle. What people get hung up on, I think I fight this battle with cops too, because I actually had a conversation with a good buddy of mine who's a police officer, is injury. They come in here and say, oh, I don't want to get hurt. And I'm like, well,
I get more people that are injured at the gym,
Yeah.
going to the gym, lifting weights,
Yep.
than I ever have somebody in my gym doing jujitsu.
you better believe it, right? I mean,
They're like, oh, I tore my shoulder. I'm like, how? And it's like, oh, shoulder presses or bench press.
with
or I
120 pound
Yeah.
dumbbells.
I tore my pec. I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I think it starts with the gym. Like if you vet the gym and you say, okay, that's what you do your homework. Like you go to gyms like this, and like my gym back home at Heath's gym. It's like those are great people, great instructors. Like it's a family atmosphere. Those people are only going to help you. And then I tell the cops, I'm like, look, I'm telling you, it's worth doing. And if you don't want to compete, if you don't want to come in here and you just want to do the hour long, like just learn and go home, do it. Nobody says you have to go in here and roll hard. You don't have to do that. I mean, that's up to you. But more often than not, what I see is when they're apprehensive about it and then they join it, they get a taste of it, they're like, oh no, I want some more. And they'll just start, do that. But I think physically, 100%, it helps you with your health. And I told you about injury. I do agree. Like I think more people get hurt doing things than they do with jiu-jitsu. Now injuries do happen, but there again, in my opinion, I think depending on what person you are, I think that it really makes you a little more of a tougher, harder person. It builds your resilience up, because like what happens is people, if they've never done it, they come in here and maybe they get that taste of it and they push it, and the next morning they feel like they're hit by a freight train.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh,
Well, a lot of
God.
people also think like jiu-jitsu is the UFC.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
everybody
Oh, yeah.
correlates, oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's why they're thinking a lot of injury, because they're watching UFC.
That's right.
And they correlate jiu-jitsu with UFC, which is totally different. Depends on the gym too, right?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
That's where if you're at a bad gym that's not really mindful of your well-being,
Yep.
then yes, injuries will probably happen
You better
a lot
believe it.
higher. But myself and Heath's gym,
Yeah.
like we're very family oriented. It's very controlled environment, and no one's out to hurt anyone.
Yeah, you got something good when people have the character like that. They're like, we're here to take care of each other and make each other better.
Yeah.
And that's the only way you get it done. Like when you go out there and you compete, yeah, you're out there alone, but the weeks and the months and even really the years that you were training with your partners, they deserve credit because they were getting you better.
Yeah.
There's no question. And that translates to law enforcement. We train together. We make each other better. So that's why I always tell them, like I was telling you need to do it. And then on the mental aspect of it, I mean, when you can go in a gym and you can, if that's your cup of tea and you don't mind going in there and getting gritty and, when I was really kind of a dunce when I first started, for sure. Like with I just wanted to go in there real hard. I didn't want to, I was paying attention, but I was like, okay, how much longer till we got, mats are open for open mats. I did, and that's you shouldn't be like that. Then I started to, get more like, okay, I need to pay attention to instruction, because then you started to appreciate the instruction. And then you're like, okay, this is the real gold, and now if I want to break a sweat, I can break a sweat. And that is great too, because you get a huge amount of stress relief. You're not concerned with whatever happened during the day. You're pushing your body. Chad Robichaux, I don't know if any of y'all know him, but he's a really big practitioner. And he's a former Marine, former law enforcement officer, and he said, I don't have time to think about what I've been stressing about when my buddy's trying to choke me. I don't have time to think about it.
Yeah.
You know, so it really is like a medicine. There's no question. Like, I feel so great when I feel so great when I don't feel so great. Does that make sense? When I feel like I'm about to die, I'm like, I needed that, you know. So it's like, you know, it's really good for your mental health, 1,000%.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we've kind of talked about it, but I can't remember. There are some larger police departments around the country that are really looking at jujitsu as training. Like they're valuing it so much. They're doing.
I think it was in Milwaukee or Michigan or something like that. Was I think one of the first law enforcement facilities or.
And they're
departments.
sending or paying either people to come in or them to take classes somewhere.
Right.
Like they're really buying into that, and like I think that's great.
Oh, yeah.
Like, would you love to see that at every place?
Yes, I would. And so again, you've done this before, because everything you ask me, I feel like, yeah, this is a great leader. So it manifests. What I've seen, it manifests in different ways, because like you'll have some agencies that are smaller, and they can't afford to spend money on certain things, like certain curriculums, certain people to come in.
Sure.
But then they'll find another way. You see things like these platforms and these programs like Gracie Survival Tactics, and then you see a lot of like Greg Thompson's. He's got Tactical Risk Control Procedures, and you got all these names, all these brilliant minds that have come together to make their own blueprint or whatever from jiu-jitsu. Like in my agency, like our administration early on, like within the last 3 years, our last chief, he saw the value in it. And then our current chief, Chief Tyndall, him and the rest of his people under his administration, they really saw the value. So now, literally, what we do is I got transferred to a full-time training spot at the police department. So that's all I do is training, and it's not just hands-on defensive tactics subject control, but it's mostly that. But you know, for like another example of this is once a week. Whoever is on day shift patrol will come and they'll get training, you know, for about 30, remember a lot, about 30 to 45 minutes. And it could be in mat time, it could be on the mats, or it could be just tabletop and watching a video of an incident. And it really helps. Like, and it's nothing crazy because they got to work. It starts in the morning, and the officers come see me, they take a break, they check out, they come in their uniform and their gear. Leave their weapons outside, and then we talk about things, or we do stuff on the mat just as a refresher, like, hey, let's go over the gift wrap, let's go over this, and let's see what it looks like from this position, let's go over this single leg takedown. And then with in-service is a big one. So like we're planning a big in-service. You mentioned that Nick did with the highway patrol. They have took off with jiu-jitsu, like Robbie Robertson over there. He has completely taken off. They've done so much. Their administration there has done so much with incorporating jiu-jitsu into their curriculum. I actually had the pleasure of going up there just to observe. Yeah. And I went up there to observe the kinds of scenarios they run, and the curriculum that they do, the checkoffs and everything. And I actually liked it so much that I brought a piece of it back, and that's what we did at our agency. Yeah. So there are agencies that are finding ways to get it out there more at the rate that they can afford to do so. Like you got smaller agencies like my hometown in Tarboro. They might not be able to do. You got like a 30 to 40 man agency versus like a 200 man agency, which is Greenville. They can't probably do like a thing where they go and they have 14 officers come in for 6 hours and they go get taught these techniques and they go through a big scenario. So they'll do it where they mandate that on a day they're off, they get paid and they come in, and I've taught there a few times. I've taught them some classes. I think a month or two ago. So you're seeing it. My message would be get it however you can, because it pays off. And you are seeing a big trend with that. People are starting to buy in and understand it. It helps. It works.
Yeah. When Luis was here, Nick who he's under, he was mentioning that him and his son were going to teach a law enforcement, like a big clinic to multiple days to some law enforcement. But he had mentioned like where he's seeing a lot of some vests and equipment you guys wear are outside and over top.
Yeah.
And I never really thought about that being an issue for you. He's like, they have such a handle in that strap.
Absolutely.
So what maybe would you want to see in agencies, or at least maybe to pause and give thought about like changing? I mean, the vests are important; they can save your life.
Absolutely.
But how maybe would you ask people to be thoughtful about how you wear them?
Yeah. So wow, that's a very good question. So you're absolutely right. We've seen it. It does happen where people have grabbed officers by their straps on their vest. Some of our officers, for a long time, I probably had my outer carrier like maybe 3 or 4 years, but up until that point, I wore it under my shirt. And that still could be a problem. You can reach through that shirt and grab the vest over top of the material. So either way I look at it, where it might be easier with the outer carrier, now you're talking about grip fighting, right?
Yeah.
Like, in the gi, you teach how to grip break and all that stuff, whether you're doing 2-up and just pushing off, or coming over and grabbing over top of the hand. There's so many ways to think about that, and that right there, that's something that we need to train more. And where do you get the benefit? You get it out of jiu-jitsu, and we've gone over that for sure. That is something I definitely want to focus on more as we go further. It hasn't happened a lot, but it has happened where officers have been grabbed by their outer carrier, and obviously it's super important. You need to know some systems to defeat that quickly. Quick go-to systems that you don't have to do a lot of funky movements and stuff. Those are great too. There's nothing wrong with them, but again, if you're talking about the average police officer, well, they're going to be able to recall when it's stressful and things are happening fast and they're amped up, or we got to be able to find those baselines, and then if we want to get a little fancier with it, we can. Because everybody loves the fancy stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody does.
That's why those flashy techniques have millions of views.
They do. Nobody wants to talk about the stuff that really makes people suffer and stuff that's easy to remember. They want the cool stuff. I can appreciate. I like the cool stuff too.
If you have any parting words for maybe your brothers and sisters in blue, or anything, either of you.
Oh, yeah. I want to say thank you both. This was so much fun.
Yeah,
dude.
thank you so much.
I
You
love
made
this.
quite the drive.
I love this gym. I love coming here when I roll. We got a great family relationship between our gym with Heath's gym and Nick's gym. We help each other ready for tournaments. There's so much of a bonding experience here. It's a great community. To my fellow law enforcement officers, I would just say, think about it, join it, give it a try. It may not be your thing, but at least try it. And this has been a great platform, and it's a great message. I hope that it reaches somebody, and I look forward to coming back here and getting some sweats in and rolling. It's always a pleasure. You
always beat me up, Corey.
That's not true. That's not true, guys. Listen, this guy, Heath beats me up, and it's like it's I don't know. It's a different beat up.
It's an emotional beat up. I have decided.
Yeah, no, for Nick.
No, for Heath. It's emotional. I feel like emotionally stabbed when he just beats me up, and he's like, haha, and he laughs and whatever, and I feel emotionally attacked when Heath beats me up.
Yeah. Well, I go back to that.
Sweetie.
There's been many examples, but it's like you're trying to survive, and it's like he looks up at me and he's grabbing my collar and he's got my sleeve, and I'm just like, God, please just, and he's just like, why are you stalling, bro? I'm just like, you just don't know what I'm feeling internally right now, but yeah, no, it's, it ain't that way it goes down. Nick definitely puts it on me, but I appreciate you for it. It gets me better.
Oh, yeah.
It's been a pleasure, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we will see you next time at Off the Mats. Bye.
Have a good one.